And we are live. Welcome, one and all. Welcome, a million times welcome. 6 infinity signs welcome to JWC Livestream. Today, our show is Story Autopsy. It's more of the classic format with Ricky and Tom. I'm Ricky, and that's Tom up there.
Hello, hello.
Um, it's been up and down and back and forth, as it were, with availability and the occasional zesting of technical difficulty, but here we are. Our Thursday show is kind of like a rotating thing, you know. 2 weeks ago, we had the paranormal inspirations. And last week, we had trouble. This week, there was some unavoidable circumstances last week. Nobody's fault. But this week, we got a nice long read for you. We got something that Tom cooked up. I've been working on this edit project, getting this Chiron 6 that I wrote, getting that done. It's been heavy duty, a lot of making sure stuff is good, but I'm almost ready. I'm almost there. I'm trying to get to this Chiron, not Chiron 6, this Pyramidia book, a novel that I want to write. Fantasy, very, very strange stuff. Not your typical high fantasy. It's all over the place. And I have Compass City to write for a role-playing book. So it's essays. I'm writing essays. I'm writing poetry. It's getting crazy, folks. It's all over the place. It's creative obsession is one thing. It's almost like I got to come up with a new term to describe what this is, you know? It's all over the place. It's like 6 different masterworks that I'm trying to get going here. It's like a hurricane's ripping through my skull, you know? But it's wonderful. There's nothing wrong with this. It's like there's not enough hours in the day to be creative. That's all it is. So I think it's great. Tom, how you doing, man? How's your creative life going?
Oh, very good. I just finished a new John Penkram story today. It's called Spectre over Avondale. It's about a storm that parks itself over this town on the Jersey coast, and all sorts of wild things start happening. Ghost dogs start being seen on the streets, and ghosts of an old railway accident come back. There's a phantom sniper that cracks windshield, but no one sees any bullets or hears any gunshots. Ball lightning, all kinds of wild stuff that's happening. And John Penkram, the sheriff of Avondale comes to Penkram. He says, "I know you're dealing this kind of odd stuff." He goes, "Could you help me out?" So they go investigating if there's this creature. It's not a cloud. It's something living in it's a cloud type creature that's sucking the life out of the town.
It's always great when there's something monstrous hiding in vapor. The eternal champion, Michael Moorcock, the Dreaming City, he has this thing that Urkun summons. It's this hissing, howling vapor. And it's just you're left to wonder what lurks in that vapor. You know, what is so terrible that it must be mystified by that, you know?
Sure.
So that sounds great, Tom. That sounds like something, hopefully you get that all straightened out and you could read some of it for us, you know?
Yes, that's a draft 0 I wrote. And last week I finished Night of Fate, where John Penkram gets bitten by a werewolf. I won't say any more. So
nothing else needs to be said when you hear something like that. What is John gonna do? You know?
Yep. So very, very interesting stuff. I sent out my 3rd query letter about Emily this week, so I'm going to see if I can crank those up and finish a really nice synopsis that I'm very happy with, and elevator pitch and book blurbs, and so everybody who's read the book says, "Do not abandon this book on Kindle," you know, and which is not abandoning it, but I said you need to really get this in print with a major agent and what have you. So
whatever you got to do, man. It's
right.
I read it in a previous draft. I read it, the whole thing, and it was nothing but great, nothing but inspirational. Excellent voice, you know. Next week, if everything goes well, we'll be going over blurbs. So definitely bring that thing in so we could do it on the show. Because
I even added a new wrinkle. When Emily dies the first time, she looks up at her arms and all her tattoos are gone. I thought that would be cool.
Well, and it's logical because that old body is left behind, and whatever this new incarnation is, it's a great mysterious book, folks. I'm hoping Tom gets it into print sooner rather than later, because it's really a fantastic read, and it's just what the doctor ordered when it comes to paranormal fiction and stuff. And dare I say, I think we'll see it soon. We'll see it in print.
Yeah, I have eight queries out, 2 rejections, and 6 I haven't heard from. So, a friend of mine who works in publishing says if you haven't heard from them, that's always good because they either they've ignored it or they're sitting on it and thinking about it. He goes, odds are you got 6 left, 3 of them are thinking about it. I said, okay, that works. So we'll see. He might be full of beans. But who knows? I'm hoping.
God bless you, Tom. You sure as heck need to be in there. I mean, I hope someone's got a pair of eyes behind that desk, because if I were sitting in that place, I'd stamp that right away. I'd be like, we're going with this, you know?
Yeah.
All right. Well, you hear that, folks? You hear that? It's like a hyperdrive of creativity just went through this sector of space. I mean, the amount of stuff we're doing, forget it. I only wish I could write full time. That's the only thing that's missing.
Imagine being able to write 8 hours a day. It would be glorious, right?
I can't. I mean, it's like on this side of the grave, you can't get more heaven concentrated than being able to just create on a daily basis and not having to worry about the usual rubbish, debt, slavery, and distractions. And I already know exactly how I do it. How would you do it, Ricky? You hear the crowd ask. Well, it's very, very simple. Wake up in the morning, get yourself oriented. There's a 4-hour block. If you can't write 2,000 words in 4 hours, I mean, I'm talking about you write fast or you type fast. I'm talking about you're a creative obsessor. You've been going. I mean, how much you write in a day, Tom?
Today I did 2,500 words. Usually I've been averaging about 1,200, even on a really bad day.
1,000 words is a beautiful word yield. Stephen King says if you write 1,000 words a day, you can write anything. And he's absolutely right to say that, because it's true. But if you had an 8-hour block, you divide it up into 2 4-hour blocks, and who knows, you could get up maybe even 4,000, 5,000 words done in a day.
Oh, sure.
It's ambitious, but if that's all you had to do and you treated it like a full-time job with the same duty and solemnity and everything else, where you're like, no, I'm working, I'm writing. You gotta, okay, I can't do that now. I'm writing, you know? If it was treated with the same thing, you'd like a job, you'd be able to get a lot done in a day. So that's the dream. That's the first of many, dreams. So the main purpose of today's show, Story Autopsy, is we're going to have you read a decent chunk. We've decided it's going to be a pretty big read. And what are you reading today, Tom?
Today is a visit to the world of Verema, an early Shirella story called Wrath of the Ice Dragon.
All right. Shirella is always welcome. That world, Verema, is it's a great fantasy world. And all that stuff you were reading last year, you were reading with, what's his name? O'Hara, right?
Right. He gets trapped in Verema, and Big adventure. That's going. I might shoot that for Vela, Amazon Vela, because I've got a lot. I have like 60 chapters before I have to worry about, typing, doing anything, continuing with my handwritten manuscript. So,
well, at the end of the show, try to remind me about this fella, because I'd like to talk about your plans when it
sure.
comes to that, because I know you're thinking about putting a Varema story up in that format. And I'd love to know what, as I'm sure our audience would, your research and everything else. So why don't you go ahead, Tom? Why don't you read us this passage?
Okay, here we go. All right. The ice dragon attacked Shirella 2 days into her commission for Prince Alkan of Elsa. She was a long way from Gianna in Tanoth, her home for the last 3 seasons. Every sort of fortune teller, tea leaf reader, and entrail scrivener came to Gianna with the promise of easy money and easy victims. The criminal element is minimal, and the food is quite good. Shirella felt at home. Situated in the north corner of Margrad, the Duchy of Elsa had few enemies. Elsa is in the east by the locks, bordered on the east by the locks, and at the west by the Queen Loassen Sea. Margrad's ruler is the Bear King, who stays at home in his capital city of Margaras. The kingdom has 5 duchies, and the actual ruling of the kingdom is left to his children. 2 of his sons have the largest duchies, but his daughter rules the most prosperous of them. The 4th and 5th duchies are small and overseen by the Bear King himself. The sons are happy with large territories to ward over. Margrad is the richest and most stable kingdom in the Southern Union. The 3rd son, Azal, sought his own kingdom, not anywhere near Margrad. He found the small dukedom of Halbeck in southern Tyrol to his liking and purchased the domain for a small fortune in emeralds. A nasty domestic conflict had broken out in Elsa, fueled by bandits brought in from the Sea of Ages. The unrest was costly. Prince Alkan reached out to his younger brother Azal for a loan. Azal has the funds he needed in the form of a small fortune in rubies and sapphires. The matter was a secretive affair, with an outsider that both princes could trust to handle it. That's where Shirella comes in. A small handful of gemstones would buy her services as a courier, and she didn't care why as long as she got paid. Prince Azal lived in a town called Sikarda, situated in the low foothills of south-central Turval. Her travels across the Biker Plains in central Islak had been uneventful. Her destination was to the south, in the Duchy of Red Oak, located on the Sea of Night. Azal's castle lay beyond the mists that enveloped the town of Sikarda. Shirella liked the mixture of tall, slim towers and low, angular buildings. Located atop a small plateau, Azal's chateau was pleasing to Shirella. It was very defensible, yet not threatening upon approach. Azal was gregarious, to say the least. A pig would be more accurate. Shirella approached the gate under full view of the portcullis guards. She ignored them until one of them spoke to her. Who wishes to enter? I am General Shirella of Elsa. I have come with a scroll from Prince Alkan. I seek an audience with Prince Azal. You are not magical? Certainly not. Do I look like a magic folk? Do not be so presumptive, young one. The guard withdrew into the tower. Moments later, the drawbridge began its noisy way down to the ground. 3 men in light armor stood at the opening, blocking her way as she approached. She dismounted and waited. The scroll of Alkan, spoke the middleman. You will hand it to me. The scroll is for the prince and no one else. If you'd like to try and take it from me, that's your choice. I'd prefer to meet with Prince Azal without your blood on my clothing. She held the scroll at shoulder level like a spear. Very well. I will take you to the prince. I am Parman, king of the guard. Captain of the guard, sorry. He nodded and allowed her to walk next to him. His gait and leather brace upon his left leg suggested he had paid much for his position. They paused at a garish, ornamented entranceway. Parman knocked with a gold-tipped riding crop. The sound within resembled that of a large gong. After a few moments, the structure shook and opened wide. A man of equal girth and height of the door stood before them. A thin scar ran across his right cheek and disappeared into a greasy beard. Shirella, I had no idea you were the one summoned by my brother. How is he, by the way? Before she could respond, he had slipped an arm around her waist. He pushed Parman away with the other beefy hand, slamming the door shut. He moved them to a large red wood table. There was enough food to feed the merchants she had spoken to in town. I have not spoken to your brother, Shirella said as she slipped away from Alkan's clutches. It should be a Kal's clutches anyway. My commission comes through his captain of the guard, Kaleen. So tell me, why have you come to see me at such a time as this? You know as well as I do, Prince Azal. Little goes on in Margurad without the king and his children hearing of it. That is why I brought the scroll to you myself. It explains everything. Azal sat down in his chair, eyeing her movements as she handed the scroll to him. What fortune he would give to have her for a single night, he thought. A futile wish at best was Shirella. Sighing, he laughed and gestured to a chair next to him. Please sit. All that standing does a person as beautiful as yourself no good at all. Exasperated, she sat down upon a stool out of his reach as he took the scroll. You may call me Azal while we are here alone in this room. Prince Azal, I have come a long way. I have a longer journey ahead of me. There is no time to play. Who knows? Some other time, she gave him the hint of a smile. Azal sighed. I can now see why Alkan trusts you. No pleasure until the job is done. Am I right? You will not relax until these jewels are safe in my brother's hands. His meaty paw came from behind the chair. Gripped tight in his hand was a leather pouch with the silver inlaid cords that tied it closed. He placed it upon the table, his eyes never leaving her. Shirella leaned forward, scooping the pouch up before Azal could reach for her. Will these be enough? She asked. That will be more than enough to fight off any bandits and settle any problems the locals have. Tell Alkan that in return, I wish to have him visit here for the feast of Kandera. You are also expected to attend. He leered at her. I will tell him. She rose to leave his presence. Do you need to check the pouch's contents? Asked the prince. Should I? Well, I won't be the one who gets in trouble if this pouch has less than you swore to supply. She raised her hand, her left eyebrow, and broke out in a sly grin. Azal swallowed hard. It's all there, plus a small Athalian blade with my coat of arms on it. Shirella nodded. That will do. Do you wish me to send a squadron of soldiers to go with you? For your protection, of course. Not necessary. They'll attract too much attention to me. Secrecy is most important. I'll be inconspicuous by myself. You could send that squadron in the direction of Elsa by another route. That would draw the criminals on the road toward them, away from my path. Give them a chest to guard, and don't tell them it's filled with stones. They'd attract so much attention that she'd have no difficulty. She smiled again as Azal sat up in his chair. An excellent idea. You will at least allow me to replace your tired horse with one for my stable for your journey. That one would never make it through the foothills. I'll keep your horse for you here. Then we could get reacquainted. He smiled at her, lust in his fat eyes. Shirella backed away and stepped toward the exit. I thank you for the new steed. I must be going. She left the room. Azal roared with laughter at her speedy departure. The horse was large for her, a war horse. It would have had the stamina to get through the rough terrain between here and Elsa. She chose to cut through the foothills instead of taking the more direct route. There would be fewer villages to move through and fewer eyes on her and the ride that was not hers. The days grew hot as she made her way through the high hills. The ice dragon had entered her field of vision on the second day as she entered a small valley. Ermal, the god shard of Tariel, glowed bright in the presence of non-sun dragons, as this one was. Shirella looked down at Ermal and its holder, the sword Bluebone. Her affinity with dragons would not give Shirella much advantage here. Shirella drew back on the reins, making the horse stop short. All she had was a few seconds' notice of its presence before the dragon was diving at her. Shirella pulled the horse to the right. Her actions would prevent the dragon from sinking its claws into her head and shoulders. The beast must have been hungry, for it attacked as soon as it spotted Shirella and her horse. It nestled in a crack in the canyon wall, waiting for a good meal. Unfortunately, horses and humans were most favored by ice dragons. The dragon shot past her as Shirella pulled her horse to the right. It swooped past, leaving an icy chill in its wake. Shirella did not have much time. Ice dragons were only a bit smaller than her horse, yet it had the strength of something twice its size. It grew ravenous and eccentric when hungry. Soon it was moving, attacking without thinking. That was knowledge that Shirella would take full advantage of now. Experience told her that she was nowhere near the lair of this dragon. Ice, lava, and marsh dragons had more of an impact on the land they lived in than any other dragon. Any land they inhabited would adjust itself to suit the physical needs of the dragon. If it stayed here in Margarad, the ground would soon begin to cool. The trees would drop their leaves while flowers would wilt and turn brown. Frost would creep up the sides of rocks and buildings, the air taking on a bitter, icy bite. If not killed or driven off, the ice dragon soon would have its own little realm, a day's march in width. By then, it would be impossible to get rid of. It flew in a rough circle to attack her again. Red talons unfurled from its front foot as it dove down at Shirella. Shirella brought the horse down low to the ground and raised her shield. There was little she could do as the animal slammed into her and the horse. The claws sank deep into the neck of the horse, killing it in an instant. Blood spurted out onto Shirella's shield and armor. The dragon carried on past her, clawing at the ground to stop its sliding. Its talons found a foothold on a small boulder and launched itself back into the air. Shirella rolled away from the dead horse as it settled to the ground. It would need to be buried quickly to keep the carcass away from the beast. She would not allow it to feed upon her steed. For an hour, the dragon kept out of her reach as Shirella buried the horse. The ground was soft, and it made the burial quick. The dragon swooped down at her several times to scare her away from the remains. Each time, Shirella sidestepped the shard talons. This made the dragon angrier each time. The walls of the valley rang with the sharp cries of the dragon. Shirella stood, weary of her digging. She backed against the stone wall, scanning the sky for her opponent. Her wait was not long, as it came screaming at her from the right side. Shirella had a second to raise her shield before the dragon was on her. They both went down in a heap. The dragon moved its head in an attempt to get around her shield and at her face. She raised an armored boot and shoved hard against the beast's chest. That sent it tottering on its back against the rocks. It flapped its wings to right itself. Shirella stood and advanced upon it. The dragon screeched after her, enveloping her in a cloud of frigid air. A shiver ran through Shirella. Freezing air was uncomfortable, even on a day as hot as this. Any more, and she would not be able to fight. The cold would sap her strength, and she would succumb to the beasts. She vowed to herself to kill her opponent before she left the valley. Her sword arm tensed as she lifted Bluebone above her head. The eyes of the dragon flashed once as it rose up and moved toward her. She swung blind as it let out another icy breath. Turning away from the cold, she felt the blade bite into the dragon's left side. It was not deep, but the wound drove the animal away. It swept into the air, only to come crashing down to the ground a stone's throw away. She looked down at the ground and saw the tip of the dragon's tail lying at her feet. Without it, the dragon would not be able to travel more than a long hop. She knew that this was the best chance to kill the dragon. It would heal within a few days and go on an orgy of killing in its rage against her. She had to make it sure she killed it now, before it could return to its lair. Her strength returning, she picked up her packs and set out after it. The bow and arrows she had with her were under her horse, crushed and useless. Bluebone would be more than enough to finish the beast off. The trail of blood was not hard to follow, as long as she kept to the confines of the valley. By nightfall, she knew the dragon would need food as dawn arrived. It had not stopped moving despite the blood it had lost already. Shirella could hear it moving through the trees. It made no effort to hide where it was going, and Shirella kept up her chase. She was eager to see the creature dead. It would be suffering now, angry at anything alive, and more dangerous than when not injured. Ice dragons slept as the sun sank below the horizon. This one was no exception. She watched the dragon begin to grow lethargic under the light of the Niall and Astera. Both moons were waxing to near fullness. She had plenty of light to watch the beast curl up against the wall of the valley. Shirella watched it with caution, making sure it was not aware of her following it. She climbed a tree and sat with her back to the trunk. She did not trust that the wounded creature would actually follow its nature and sleep. The breaking of tree limbs shook her awake. Looking up, she thought it was almost high. She saw that it was almost high sun. The day was half over, and the beast had only now begun to move. She saw the dragon climb out of the valley at a point where there was a slight cut in the earth from the long periods of rain. She could see that blood still flowed from the wound she had dealt it. It began to move in high arcs that amounted to little more than hops. Each time it landed, it stopped and held its tail up. The pain had to be great for it to move like it was doing. Shirella dropped out of the tree and made her way up the hill. "Today you will breathe your last," she said, boosting her confidence. Blood had soaked into the ground here in the amounts that gave Shirella hope that her hunt would be over soon. The creature was not hard to follow on open ground. Like an angry wolverine, its very presence would trigger other animals to leave the area. No one challenged it as it stopped several times to rest. Shirella kept out of its sight as best she could. "It may be in so much pain that it's forgotten me," Shirella said to keep her mind on her goal. Less than an hour later, it changed course, moving toward a small walled-in village. No one moved along the wall as the dragon moved toward its gates. In this region, water had dried up from over-farming. The dried fields nearby, this region couldn't survive without a handy water supply. The dragon hopped onto the gates and hauled itself over, disappearing into the town. Shirella moved quick, sensing a chance to kill the creature in the village. There would be much less chance to find food here and more places to move through for a good kill. The gate was heavy, and she opened it with difficulty. Paper and straw blew along the streets, making enough noise to cover her movements. Spots of blood told her where the dragon was heading. The blood was clotting now, half filling the paw prints on the left side. It was not bleeding much, but enough to follow. She heard it shriek as it came to an intersection. Turning to her right, she saw a squat and weather-beaten cottage at the end of the street. The dragon was clawing its way inside. Thinking it was its lair, she stepped out into the middle of the street to call to it. Small movements around the dragon's back got her attention. She thought of dragon pups staying close to their home. That thought was dismissed in seconds as she saw that the village had not become frozen. Shirella smiled as she saw that the small movements were made by Grylem, small creatures related to gargoyles. That was as much as Shirella knew about them. The dragon was breaking into their adopted home, eating as many of them as it could in the process. The Grylem were busy rubbing their hands together, igniting small pieces of wood. They dropped the burning wood onto the dragon's back. These attempts to distract it did little good. The hide of the ice dragon was cold enough to the touch to put the flames out seconds after they landed. The Grylem trapped inside were trying to dig a hole in the roof to escape. Two of the beings were digging through from one corner of the roof. The dragon was blocking the only exit for those trapped inside. Shirella watched helpless as the tiny Grylem seemed to swoon from the dragon's icy breath and fall to the floor. They were eaten as soon as they hit the floor. The dragon finished squeezing into the cottage and was gone from her sight. Shirella swore aloud and ran to the building. The cottage was empty as she peered into it. She heard small cries as she stepped onto the main floor. To her right was a small square in the floor. It was a root cellar. The doors were long gone. Bloody prints led into the hole. The tiny cries of distress reached out from here. Shirella took out her sword and climbed down into the cellar. She stood in a tunnel as tall as she was. A dim light was all she could see. It was from a small fire off to one corner of the room. The sound of the dragon feeding could be heard. Sickened, she raised her shield and moved forward. The dragon squatted at the edge of a small hole ringed with ice. Two of the Grylem flew out of the opening and made an effort to get past the deadly creature. An ice-cold mouthful of air issued from the dragon, and the Grylem dropped to the ground, helpless to the ground. No more Grylam came out of the home after the two Sorella saw had succumbed to the cold. Dun, dun, dun. So there we have that. Now the Grylam, Lim, her faithful companion, is a Grylam, but his wings are stunted, and he was like the runt of the litter. So he's like an orphan. So anyway, that's where the dragon and the Grylam and uh-oh. I can't hear you. Oops. Hello.
Can you hear me now?
Oh yeah, we're good.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Someone keeps calling and interfering with the show. It's really great
Wow.
how Zoom can't regulate that. I say no, and it's like, you're only half there. It's like, what does that mean, man? We've been through all these years of this, and we can't get this to work right. It's like,
yeah.
Anyway, whatever. Sorry, folks, however you want to say it. Anyway, Tom, great story, man. Sherelle is just a fantastic character.
She doesn't put up with any crap from anybody.
Unless she's paid to.
Right.
Unless she's paid to.
Unless she wants to.
She's disciplined enough, because that guy in the beginning, he's all about her, and he's coming on like garlic or whatever. He doesn't want to hear no, right?
Right.
And she's like diplomatic. She's diplomatic. She could go over there and break his back like Bane did to Batman if she wanted to, but she's like, no, I got something going on here.
Yeah.
There's emeralds, there's a transaction, there's all these royals. She's making money.
She's business first, and then maybe I'll come back, which is a fat chance that I'll come back, you know.
Yeah, she'll come back. He better not hang waiting for that to happen, that cat, you know.
Yeah. And she doesn't let captains of the guard distract her from, you know, when she says, you know,
no,
you try to take this thing from me, and I don't want to be in front of the prince with your blood on me. So why don't you just let me in? You know, and they go,
yeah,
okay.
yeah.
So.
And then she goes galloping off, and then it's probably a young ice dragon. It gets her horse, and she's like, man, now I gotta do this now, you know. And all that combat and stuff is just so great. What I'm noticing is the pacing, man. You're like boom, 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 going back and forth, you know. First the horse dies, then she fends it off, then she's guarding the body, then it's this back and forth with the dragon, and then she wounds it. It's a wonderful thing, that pacing. You know, you start off with the world building, kingdom, and this big fatback noble, and all the intrigue and the stuff like that. A lot of Game of Thrones ishness, exemplary high fantasy with the world building. And then she goes into the court, and we find out the flavor of this court, that this guy is just used to getting what he wants, and he doesn't know what he's reaching for with her.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. Now Sherella's not a prude. I mean, she's got a very active let's call it love life. But not with, you know, to her choosing.
Yeah, so. I totally believe that that's the case. I don't think she does what she wants to do. That's the thing that we're getting from this.
Yeah. She doesn't use her body for favors, you know, or just because, you know, I don't know what that makes her a free woman, a someone with a mind of her own. She's you know, so.
Yeah.
But she knows what she wants and she gets her way, And sometimes sometimes she bluffs, like with that captain of the guard. I think she was just kind of trying to bluff him. If he had said, we're still not gonna let you win, she would have thought of something else. So, but threatening to
Yeah.
get your blood on her blouse, I said, why take a chance with this wild chick? So,
Yeah. So when did you first come up with Shirella? Like when did she occur to you as a character?
I'd say maybe close to say 25, 30 years ago. I have a friend, his name is Michael, and he was running a D&D campaign. And he goes, how'd you like to help me come up with some things to throw at these people? It was like the dungeon master. So I was designing traps for him and creatures and wild situations. And I slowly but surely came up with this mythology of a world where a person could worship.
I think it dropped, Tom. I don't think we're live streaming right now.
Oh, stink! It says live on my.
I just don't have anything where I am. It's like the computer just dropped. It said there's an unknown era, and I don't know if we are. You see it is?
It says live on your screen.
Yeah, that's very strange because it says that it's dropped here. I love it. I love how good this works. Anyway,
are we going to proceed like we're live, or you want to?
We might as well. I don't know if it's. I don't know what it's doing. I don't know what it's doing. It's amazing.
All right. So anyway,
so tell me about Shirella. The first time you ever thought of her. Let's just assume it's going.
Yeah. I was coming up with some ideas for D&D, and I started coming up with this mythology for a world where people could worship two wild things. Like I came up with cats and gravity. Would be their two things. I said, there could be these gemstones that could have the essence of magic in them, and it could be devoted to things like cats and gravity, time and dragons, on and on and on. I said, wait a minute, time and dragons is a good one. So he invited me to play, so I had to come up with for the character. So I came up with I always play thieves, so I said, let me do a female thief, and for some reason the name Shirella popped into my head. So I came up with this wild. He said, would you let me have an ancient sword? He goes, sure, an ancient sword, no problem. So that's where Shirella came in, and I said, I really like playing that. And I started developing her beyond the D&D adventure, that the sword is like 10,000 years old, and it has this gemstone in it from the gods, and it lives on blood, and it's as new as the day it was formed, this sword.
I find that some of the best characters come out of RPG settings too. I have a number of those that's true for. Masroth, Big Daddy, those. I mean, Big Daddy and Masroth, especially Big Daddy, happened before, but they were both things I role played, and that's where you got the Varema world from.
Started slowly grow. Yeah. Then one day I woke up and I had this idea for a story. What if Shirella went on a quest out into the middle of the desert to this town that nobody lives in, and yet there's obvious signs of occupation to steal a treasure that no one's ever been able to take out of the town. I said, okay, that's my premise, and I started writing, and I said, now where is this taking place? I drew a little map, and the map slowly grew, and I said, now who would get her to get to this treasure? I said, what if I gave her a companion who was as tall as her palm, who was a little gargoyle type creature? That's where Lim came from. And Lim was this wise guy who can't keep his mouth shut, and always cracks wise with no matter who's there, kings, queens, barbers, whatever. He's always got something to say. He's like picture like a Bugs Bunny type if your best buddy was a little Bugs Bunny type thing.
But Bugs Bunny was a homunculus gargoyle. Yeah. I
Right.
mean, genius, Tom. Genius. Sorry.
And
Like, it's just so
and he's
good.
always in the stories I wrote, early stories I wrote, he's always talking her into going out and stealing things that can't be stolen, like this treasure from this town that's been deserted for 10,000 years, And I have another story where she goes, there's this castle down this couple miles away. In the middle of the castle, there's this big room, and in the middle room is a crown just waiting to be stolen. Because I've been there a bunch of times, and there's never anybody there except this guy, and all these statues. So she goes, okay. She goes there and to steal this thing, and finds out that the crown is there. It's a trap, and all those statues are all people that tried to steal the thing. And she's got to figure out a way to not get turned into a statue, and get out of there alive. And and she's always yelling at Lim, "Why do you do these things?" And he's greedy too. He wants gold. He loves,
It's great. It's great, Tom. It's great. It's a rich world. Why don't you tell us about your plans for Vela, and then we'll call it.
I have a huge fantasy novel, actually 5 novels set in Verema where Shirella lives. And I've written 80% of it. I got distracted when my daughter was born, and I'm getting back to it now. So I have a lot. I have about 3,000 pages. And
that's wonderful, man.
Yeah. So I was thinking I'll take the first novel and slice it up and turn it into a Vela serial. Now, Amazon Vela has a new format called, it's only about a year old or so, Vela, where you serialize a story a little piece at a time, say about 1,200 words at a time. And people who want to read them pay these tokens that they could buy, 500 for a couple dollars, whatever. And your story, depending on the length, would be charged, say 1,200 words would be maybe 7 tokens. And you pay, and that way you could get monthly subscribers or subscribers to this story. And the first 3 are always free. And what you want to do is create such an incredible draw in those 3 free chapters that people want to buy chapter 4, 5, 6, 7, etc. And so I thought Shirella, this big gigantic Verema story would be perfect to do on Vela, because I could go on 5 or 6 years with this story. And I don't know if that's really the right thing to do, is to have this essential never-ending story on Vela that or 5 pages at a time, times 300, 600 chapters I could probably do, and maybe it could set a precedent that for this gigantic story that So what it was is when I get past, what I was going to do is, when I get to the end of the first novel, I would gather all those pieces together and then put it on Kindle as a Verema novel, and because you're allowed to do that, and so
that sounds interesting. Well, we'll have to keep track of you and your plans for that.
I will announce it as soon as it goes up. I mean,
please do. And while you're on that, why don't you plug your books and we'll call it, because I don't know what's going on with this live stream anyway. So
okay, I have 3 books actually on Amazon Kindle. The first book is called Dwellers in the Shadows. The second book is called Is It Still Out There? These are 2 collections of short stories, spooky stories to keep you up at night, right? And third story is a collection that Rich, you and I have stories in, called Corporate Gothic.
Oh yeah,
recommend. It's got some really good stuff in
it. Good stuff. Yeah. All right, folks, head over to Amazon. Check out Richard Andrew Olkis. That's the author name. Nidhogg Chronicles. Crusade of Shadows. Thank you so much for listening to JWC Livestream, and we'll hear from you soon. I'm going to call you right back, Tom.
Sounds good.
Log out.